Life wasn't supposed to be this hard, was it? That thought lingered in my mind as I folded Will's tiny superhero pajamas, the fabric worn thin from so many washes. My son's laughter carried faintly from the living room, where he was watching his favorite cartoons. His giggles were a lifeline, pulling me from the quicksand of worry that seemed to consume my every waking moment. Mark walked into the kitchen, tossing his briefcase onto the counter with a loud thud. His tie was loosened, his brow furrowed, and his mouth already set in a frown. I braced myself. "Bills came in today," he said, holding up a stack of envelopes like they were evidence against me in some unseen trial. "Do you even realize how much Will's latest treatment cost? This is getting out of hand, Jane." I bit my tongue, swallowing the words I wanted to say. Of course I knew. Every receipt, every medical bill was burned into my mind. Our son's health was worth every penny, but the weight of it was suffocating. "I'll figure something out," I murmured, focusing on wiping down the counter. "Figure something out? What are you going to do? Sell lemonade on the corner?" Mark's voice was sharp, his words cutting deeper than he realized. Or maybe he did. "You're the one who wanted to stay home. Maybe if you'd stuck with your career, we wouldn't be in this mess." The accusation stung. I had been good at my job, damn good. But when Will came along, Mark convinced me that staying home was the best choice for our family. "You're so talented, Jane," he had said, "but Will needs you more than any job does." Back then, it felt like a sacrifice I was willing to make for love and for my son. Now, it felt like a trap. "I stayed home because we agreed it was best for Will," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Don't act like this was all my decision." Mark scoffed and turned away, muttering under his breath about how tired he was. The tension in the room was thick, but I didn't push. There wasn't any point. He'd made it clear where he stood. Later that evening, after I'd tucked Will into bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at our bills. I ran my fingers over the numbers, trying to make sense of how we'd gotten here. When I married Mark, I thought we'd face the world as a team. But lately, it felt like I was carrying the load alone while he stood on the sidelines, pointing out every misstep. Will's laugh echoed in my memory, a bittersweet reminder of why I had to keep going. No matter how heavy things got, I'd find a way to make it work. For him. Always for him. It started with a knock on the door that felt louder than it should have. I was in the middle of chopping vegetables for dinner when Mark called out from the living room, "I'll get it." A moment later, a voice I didn't recognize, smooth, polished, and overly familiar, floated into the kitchen. "Mark, it's been so long." I peered around the corner, wiping my hands on a dish towel. Standing in the entryway was a tall, impeccably dressed woman with perfectly coiffed hair and an air of confidence that screamed old money. She held a designer handbag in one hand and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Jane, this is Emily," Mark said, his tone unusually bright. "We dated back in college." "Back when you were young and foolish," Emily teased, touching his arm in a way that made my stomach churn. I stepped forward, forcing a polite smile. "Nice to meet you, Emily." She gave me a once-over, her eyes flicking to my simple outfit and the faint flour smudge on my cheek. "Likewise," she said, though her tone didn't match the word. Emily didn't stay long that day, but her presence lingered. Over the next few weeks, her name came up more and more often in conversation. "Emily thinks I should apply for this position," Mark would say, or "Emily mentioned she might know someone who could help us out." Then came the bombshell. Emily's father, a big name in the stock trading world, had offered Mark a position at his firm. "It's a huge opportunity, Jane," Mark said over dinner one night, his excitement palpable. "The kind of job that could turn things around for us." I wanted to be happy for him, but something didn't sit right. Maybe it was the way he'd been texting more than usual, or how he suddenly seemed so much more concerned with his appearance, or maybe it was the way he'd started saying "I" instead of "we" when talking about the future. It wasn't just professional, either. Emily began popping up in our lives more often, casual lunches that turned into dinners, phone calls that dragged late into the night. "She's just trying to help," Mark would say when I voiced my discomfort. "She knows what it's like to struggle. She wants to see me succeed." But it wasn't just help, it was manipulation, subtle and insidious. She'd drop comments like, "You're so much more ambitious than I remembered," or It's a shame you've had to put up with so much. Always with a meaningful glance, always just enough to plant a seed. Mark didn't seem to notice, or maybe he didn't want to. As the weeks went on, the lines blurred. Emily wasn't just a helpful contact. She was a reminder of the life Mark thought he deserved. And I, it seemed, was just another reminder of the one he wanted to leave behind. The day it all fell apart began like any other, mundane and exhausting. Will had another round of treatments scheduled, and I was juggling phone calls with the insurance company while trying to prepare his breakfast. Mark sat at the table, scrolling through his phone with a detached air that had become all too familiar. "We need to talk," he said suddenly, setting his phone down. His tone was sharp, his eyes avoiding mine. I froze, the spatula in my hand hovering over the skillet. "About what?" Mark exhaled heavily, like he was gearing up for a performance. This isn't working, Jane. This whole life. I can't do it anymore." The air felt sucked out of the room. "What are you talking about?" He pushed his chair back and stood, pacing like a man rehearsing lines. "I've been thinking about this for a while. You're not the person I thought you were. You've changed." "Changed?" I set the spatula down, my hands trembling. "Mark, we've been under so much stress. Will's treatments, the bills. It's a lot, but we're doing the best we can." "That's the thing," he snapped. "You're not doing enough. I'm the only one keeping this family afloat. And what do I get for it? A wife who nags me and a house full of problems." The words stung like a slap. "Not doing enough?" My voice cracked. "I gave up my career, my independence, everything for this family, for you and Will." He scoffed, shaking his head. "That was your choice, Jane. No one forced you." My stomach twisted. Where is this coming from? Is this about Emily? Mark's eyes flicked to mine, just for a second, before darting away. The silence stretched, heavy and damning. "Oh my God," I whispered. "It is about her." "She understands me," he said almost defensively. "She sees the potential in me that you never did." "Potential?" My voice rose. "Mark, I've supported you through everything. I've been here, holding this family together while you—" "While I what?" He cut me off, stepping closer. "Work my ass off for nothing? Watch you waste away, unable to even contribute financially? Emily offered me a chance to fix my life, Jane, to fix everything." The room spun. "And what about Will? What about me?" Mark's jaw tightened. "Emily's father offered me a position at his firm. It's a fresh start, a real opportunity. I can't pass it up." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're leaving us? Leaving Will?" "He'll understand when he's older," Mark said coldly. "And let's face it, you'll manage. You always do." The casual cruelty of his words left me reeling. "You're abandoning your son for a rich ex-girlfriend? How could you?" Mark grabbed his keys from the counter. "I deserve to be happy, Jane. For once in my life, I'm choosing what's best for me." Tears streamed down my face as he walked to the door. "You're a coward, Mark," I yelled after him. "Running away doesn't make you happy. It makes you selfish." He turned, his expression blank. "Goodbye, Jane." Then he was gone. The sound of the door slamming shut echoed through the house. I sank to the floor, sobbing, as Will's tiny voice called from the other room. "Mommy, what's wrong?" Through my tears, I forced a smile and whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. Everything's going to be okay." But I wasn't sure if I believed it. Not yet. Moving back to my mom's house felt like stepping backward in time. The small home, with its worn carpets and creaky doors, was a stark contrast to the life I'd built, or thought I had. Boxes of Will's toys and my few belongings cluttered the corners of the tiny living room. "Mommy, is this our new house?" Will asked, his wide, innocent eyes scanning the space. "For now, sweetie," I said softly, kneeling to his level. "Grandma's going to help us while I figure some things out." My mom, bless her heart, hugged me tightly that first night, her frail arms stronger than they looked. "We'll get through this, Janie," she whispered. "You're stronger than you think." But each day brought new challenges. I scoured job boards and sent out resumes. only to face rejection after rejection. 6 years out of the workforce felt like a scarlet letter stamped on my forehead. Employers didn't seem to care that I'd spent that time raising a child and keeping a household afloat. One particularly tough morning, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at another polite, "We've decided to move forward with other candidates" email. My mom placed a cup of tea in front of me, her weathered hand resting on my shoulder. "You've always been good with computers," she said gently. "Maybe it's time to start fresh, Janie. Don't give up." Her words lingered as I scrolled through my contacts, wondering if there was anyone left in my life who might be able to help. That's when I saw Alex's name. I hadn't spoken to Alex in years, not since college, when he'd confessed his feelings for me and I'd turned him down. Back then, I was too wrapped up in Mark to even consider anyone else. Now, I wasn't sure if reaching out to him was the right thing to do, but I was desperate. I typed out a message, hesitated, and hit send before I could overthink it. "Hi, Alex. It's been a long time. I hope you're doing well. I was wondering if you might have some advice about getting back into tech." To my surprise, his response came almost immediately. "Jane, it's great to hear from you. Let's catch up. I'd be happy to help." A few days later, we met at a coffee shop. Alex looked every bit the successful professional. Sharp suit, confident smile, but his warm demeanor hadn't changed. "Jane," he said, pulling me into a friendly hug, "it's been too long." I told him everything, the struggles, the heartbreak, the daunting task of starting over. Alex listened intently, his expression shifting between sympathy and admiration. "You're stronger than most people I know," he said. "I have an idea. Come meet me at my office tomorrow." The next day, sitting across from Alex in his sleek office, I felt a mix of gratitude and desperation. The polished mahogany desk between us seemed symbolic of the distance between our lives now. He'd made it big, and I was starting from scratch. "I've been thinking about your situation, Jane," Alex said, leaning forward. "You have a lot of potential. I remember how talented you were in college. You just need an opportunity to prove yourself." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. "I'll take anything, Alex. I just need a chance." "Well," he said, smiling warmly, "we've got an opening for an intern at the firm. It's unpaid for now, but it's a foot in the door. With your skills and determination, I'm confident you can climb the ranks in no time." The word unpaid stung, but I wasn't in a position to be picky. I thought about Will, about the mounting medical bills, and my mom's weary face as she helped care for him. This was my shot. "Thank you, Alex," I said, my voice trembling. "I'll work harder than anyone. I promise." He held up a hand to stop me. "I know you will, but I also know what you're dealing with. Let me help with Will's medical bills." I froze, stunned. "Alex, I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking," he said firmly. "I'm offering. It's a loan, Jane. Pay me back when you're on your feet. Right now you need to focus on getting your life back together, not drowning in debt." Tears filled my eyes, and I quickly blinked them away. "You don't know what this means to me." Alex smiled. "I think I do. Now let's get you started. Your internship begins Monday." That weekend, I sat at my mom's kitchen table, poring over cybersecurity textbooks and online tutorials. I hadn't touched technical work in years, but it was like flexing a muscle I hadn't used in a long time. It hurt at first, but it came back to me. "Mom," I said, looking up from my laptop, "I'm going to make this work. For Will. For us." She patted my hand, her eyes filled with pride. "I know you will, Janie. You've always been a fighter." On Monday, I stepped into Alex's firm with a mix of nerves and determination. The office buzzed with energy, employees rushing around with purpose. My small cubicle in the corner felt like a world away from Alex's office, but it was a start. By the end of the day, I was exhausted but exhilarated. The work was challenging, and I had a long road ahead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving forward. Every keystroke, every solved problem, every late-night study session. It wasn't just for me. It was for Will. For the future I was determined to build for us. Alex had thrown me a lifeline, and I wasn't going to waste it. The early days at the firm were grueling. I'd forgotten how steep the learning curve could be, but I was determined to climb it. My cubicle was a modest corner with just enough space for my laptop, a notepad, and a small photo of Will. It was my reminder of why I was doing this, of the little boy waiting at home who needed me to succeed. The first week, I buried myself in technical manuals, online courses, and company projects. Late at night, when Will was asleep, I'd study cyber threats and security protocols until my eyes burned. During meetings, I jotted down every piece of advice from my coworkers, determined to absorb as much as I could. Jane, Alex said one afternoon, stopping by my desk, you've already streamlined 2 processes in your first month. That's impressive. Just trying to keep up, I said with a small smile, though inside I glowed with pride. By the 3 month mark, I was tackling more complex assignments. I learned how to anticipate client needs, pinpoint vulnerabilities, and offer solutions before problems even surfaced. My knack for understanding people, once a skill I'd undervalued, turned out to be a secret weapon in my new field. One of my first major wins came during a client meeting. I'd spent hours preparing for it, poring over the company's network data. When the client expressed concern about a potential data breach, I calmly presented a detailed plan to reinforce their systems. The client leaned back, visibly impressed. This is solid. Did you come up with this? Jane led the effort. Alex chimed in, giving me a proud nod. That moment felt like a turning point. For the first time in years, I felt valued not just for what I could give to others, but for what I was capable of achieving. Within a year, I transitioned from unpaid intern to full-time analyst. The promotion came with a new office, better pay, and a deep sense of accomplishment. I could finally provide for Will without borrowing from Alex or relying on my mom's limited savings. I also began mentoring new hires, remembering how intimidating my first days had been. My colleagues often commented on my work ethic and adaptability. They didn't know about the fire fueling me, the betrayal, the humiliation, the years I'd lost. One day, Alex called me into his office. Jane, he said, handing me an offer letter, we want you to take on a senior role. Your work has been exceptional, and the team respects you. I stared at the letter, my heart pounding. Senior threat analyst? I whispered. You've earned it, Alex said with a grin. But don't think this means you can slack off. With my new title came a renewed sense of purpose. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. My confidence grew with every challenge I overcame, every problem I solved. The paycheck that came with my promotion allowed me to move Will and my mom into a better home, a place where we could finally breathe. One night, as I tucked Will into bed, he looked up at me and said, Mommy, are you happy now? The question caught me off guard, but I realized the answer was yes. I wasn't completely healed, but I was on my way. I am, sweetie, I said, kissing his forehead. And I'll keep working to make sure you are too. Every time I walked into the office, I felt a sense of belonging. The people here respected me, something I hadn't felt in years. And as I grew in my role, I realized that I was no longer the broken woman who had been abandoned and betrayed. I was building a life not just for Will, but for myself. The fire of betrayal that had once consumed me had transformed into something else: drive, resilience, and purpose. I wasn't just rising from the ashes, I was soaring. And this was only the beginning. When I got my senior role, I thought my focus would only be on building a new life for Will and myself. But as the days passed, the wounds Mark left began to itch in a way that I couldn't ignore. I didn't want him back, not in a million years. But the injustice of his betrayal still gnawed at me. So one evening, as I sat in front of my computer after putting Will to bed, I made a decision. I was going to uncover the truth about Mark and Emily. I had the skills, the tools, and most importantly, the motivation. The first step was to find a weak link. I remembered Mark's habit of reusing passwords, so I started there. Within hours, I gained access to his email. It felt strange at first. This was someone I used to love. But then I reminded myself of all the ways he'd hurt me, and my resolve solidified. Scrolling through his inbox was like opening a Pandora's box. Mark had been corresponding with Emily about opportunities at her father's stock trading company. The emails hinted at shady dealings, and it didn't take long to figure out what was going on. Mark was knee-deep in insider trading, sharing confidential information with Emily in exchange for promises of promotions and financial stability. I dug deeper, cross-referencing emails, transaction records, and meeting notes. The patterns were undeniable. He was using his position to gain early access to sensitive stock information, buying and selling shares before the public could react. It was illegal, unethical, and, knowing Mark, entirely predictable. But that wasn't all. As I pieced the puzzle together, I realized that Emily wasn't just a bystander. She was orchestrating everything. Emily had been funneling money out of Mark's accounts to fund her lavish lifestyle and personal investments. There were payments for luxury vacations, designer clothes, and even a down payment on a penthouse in her name. Emily's emails to her friends painted an even uglier picture. "Mark's useful for now," one email read, "but once Daddy realizes he's a liability, I'll cut him loose. I've got bigger plans." The more I uncovered, the more I felt a mix of rage and vindication. Mark hadn't just betrayed me, he was being betrayed himself, and Emily was setting him up to take the fall if things went south. My heart pounded as I compiled the evidence. Emails, financial statements, trading logs. It was all there, a damning trail of deceit. I knew I couldn't just sit on this information. It was time to expose the truth. I created a secure file, encrypting everything I'd found. My training had taught me how to protect sensitive data, and this was about as sensitive as it got. I also made sure to keep backups, just in case. As I stared at the folder labeled Justice, I felt a surge of empowerment. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about holding Mark accountable for the choices he'd made, for the family he'd abandoned, and for the lies he'd built his new life on. Out of curiosity, I used my tools to check their financial situation. Mark had sold the car we once shared, and Emily had convinced him to drain his savings to invest in their future. The irony was rich. He left me and Will for a life of luxury, and now he was being used as a financial crutch by a woman who had no intention of sticking around. The last straw was discovering that Mark had been neglecting to pay child support. He hadn't sent a single penny since leaving. It wasn't surprising, but it still stung. This man had turned his back on his son, all for the illusion of an easy life. By the time I finished, it was late, and my eyes burned from staring at the screen. But I felt a sense of accomplishment I hadn't experienced in years. For so long, I'd felt powerless, like my life was dictated by forces outside my control. But now, I held the reins. As I closed my laptop, I glanced at the photo of Will on my desk. His smile reminded me why I was doing this. This wasn't just about Mark or Emily. This was about proving to myself that I was stronger than they'd ever given me credit for. I never imagined myself falling in love again, not after everything Mark put me through. But life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. Alex was always there, steady, patient, and kind. At first, I was too focused on rebuilding my life to notice the way his gaze lingered a little too long, or how he always seemed to find reasons to check in on me. One evening, after wrapping up a long project, Alex invited me to dinner. It wasn't the first time we'd gone out as friends, but something felt different that night. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, like I was the only person in the room, or how he genuinely listened when I talked about my day. Over dessert, Alex cleared his throat nervously. "Jane," he began, "I need to tell you something. I've admired you for a long time. Not just for your resilience, but for who you are. You're brilliant, kind, and strong. I think I've fallen for you." For a moment, I was stunned. It had been so long since anyone looked at me the way he did, without judgment or expectation. My heart fluttered, but fear held me back. "Alex, I don't know if I'm ready for this," I admitted. "After everything with Mark, I'm still trying to find my footing." He nodded, his expression warm. "I understand. I'm not asking for anything right now. I just needed you to know how I feel. I'll wait as long as you need." His words stayed with me long after that night. Over the next few months, as Alex continued to support me, both personally and professionally, I realized something profound. I wasn't just rebuilding my life. I was creating a new one. And maybe, just maybe, Alex could be a part of it. One evening, while watching Will play in the park, I turned to Alex and said, "I think I'm ready to let someone in again." The smile that spread across his face was worth every moment of hesitation. From that day on, Alex and I became partners in every sense of the word. Alex's belief in me didn't just stop at our personal relationship. One day during a brainstorming session at the firm, he turned to me with an excited glint in his eye. "Jane, you've been a game changer here. Have you ever thought about starting something of your own?" The idea was thrilling, but intimidating. "Are you serious? I've only just found my footing here." "Exactly," he said, grinning. You've proven yourself. You have the skills, the drive, and the experience. I think we should co found a new division under the firm's umbrella, one focused on advanced cybersecurity innovations. We could be partners. The thought of becoming a co owner felt like a dream I hadn't dared to dream. But with Alex by my side, it didn't feel impossible. Let's do it, I said, my voice filled with determination. Over the next few months, we poured ourselves into building the new division. Drawing from my experiences and Alex's expertise, we created something truly groundbreaking. Our innovative approach to cybersecurity attracted high-profile clients, and our success quickly put us on the map as industry leaders. The new division thrived, and so did our relationship. Alex wasn't just my partner in business. He was my rock, my confidant, and the kind of man I'd thought only existed in fairy tales. Together, we built a life filled with respect, laughter, and love. Will adored Alex, and seeing them bond brought tears to my eyes. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a family again. Not one I'd fallen into by chance, but one I'd chosen for myself. One evening, as we celebrated a major milestone at the firm, Alex raised a toast. To Jane, he said, his eyes locking with mine, for proving that strength and kindness can build empires, and for showing us all what true resilience looks like. I smiled, feeling the warmth of his words and the support of the people around me. This was my triumph, not just over Mark or Emily, but over the version of myself that once doubted her worth. I'd found success, love, and most importantly, myself. And this was only the beginning. I wasn't sure when the idea first took root. Maybe it was the night I sat by Will's bedside, exhausted from work, but determined to keep moving forward. Or maybe it was the moment I uncovered the mountain of evidence against Mark. Either way, I knew what I had to do. Mark had walked away from me and our son, leaving nothing but pain in his wake. He blamed me for everything, yet his actions were the root of our misery. And now he was out there committing crimes, living the life he'd stolen from me and Will. It was time for him to face the consequences. On a quiet Thursday morning, I sent the evidence of Mark's fraud to two key recipients, Mark's company's compliance department and the Securities and Exchange Commission. To ensure maximum impact, I also leaked it to a prominent financial news outlet. The story practically wrote itself. Rising star caught in insider trading scandal. Saw it. The moment I hit send, I felt a wave of nervous energy. What if they didn't act on it? What if Mark somehow got away with it? But deep down, I knew the evidence was solid. There was no escaping this. The news broke within 48 hours. I'll never forget the headline. Top trader accused of insider trading. Explosive evidence surfaces. It spread like wildfire. Social media, news channels, financial blogs. Everyone was talking about Mark. I watched from my office as the story unfolded. Mark's company immediately issued a statement distancing themselves from him and confirming an internal investigation. By the end of the day, Mark's name was removed from the company website. He'd been fired. The SEC opened an official inquiry, and within a week, Mark was subpoenaed. His lavish lifestyle came crashing down as reporters camped outside his home and followed him everywhere. The Mark who'd once gloated about his perfect life now looked haggard and defeated on the evening news. Emily's response was as predictable as it was satisfying. The moment Mark's trouble became public, she cut ties. She filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, but taking the lion's share of their remaining assets. Their flashy cars, designer furniture, and upscale condo were all sold off as part of the settlement. Emily released a statement claiming she had no knowledge of Mark's illegal activities, painting herself as a victim. I wasn't buying it, and neither was anyone else, but it didn't matter. She got what she wanted and left Mark in the dust. Mark, on the other hand, had nothing. His accounts were frozen pending the investigation, and with no job, no wife, and mounting legal fees, he was drowning. He tried reaching out to old friends and colleagues, but no one wanted to be associated with him. The man who had once mocked me for being a burden was now utterly alone. I didn't celebrate publicly. I didn't need to. Watching Mark face the consequences of his choices was enough. For years, he'd acted without regard for anyone but himself. Now the world saw him for who he really was. I was enjoying a rare quiet evening at home, sipping tea and reviewing some work notes while Will played with his action figures nearby. The knock at the door was unexpected, but I didn't think much of it. Probably a neighbor or a delivery. When I opened the door, my heart sank. It was Mark. He looked nothing like the man who had once flaunted his success and superiority. His suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and his face lined with desperation. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe, making no effort to invite him in. "Jane," he started, his voice hoarse. "Can I come in, please?" I shook my head. "Say what you came to say and leave." Mark rubbed his hands together nervously, looking down at the porch as if gathering his thoughts. "I made a mistake," he admitted, his voice cracking. "Leaving you and Will. It was the worst decision of my life. Emily, she left me. Took everything. I've lost my job, my reputation, everything I worked for. But I've been thinking about us, about you, and I want to make things right." I raised an eyebrow. "Make things right? Mark, you left us. You abandoned me and your own child to chase some fantasy life with Emily. And now that it's fallen apart, you think you can just walk back into our lives?" His face twisted in anguish. "I know I messed up, but I've changed. I swear. I see it all clearly now. I should have appreciated what I had with you. Please, Jane, for Will's sake, let's try again." I couldn't help but laugh, but there was no humor in it, just disbelief. "Will's sake? Don't you dare use our son as an excuse to crawl back here. You didn't care about him when you walked out the door. You didn't care when I begged you to stay, and you didn't care when I was drowning under the weight of it all." Mark flinched but pressed on. "I know I was wrong, but people deserve second chances. Don't you think Will deserves a family? Don't you want him to have both his parents?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice but sharpening my tone. "You think I don't know what you are, Mark? That I don't know the lies, the fraud, the betrayal? Let me make it clear. I was the one who exposed you. Every piece of evidence, every detail, that was me. And you know what? I'd do it again." His face turned pale. "You? It was you?" "Damn right it was me," I spat. "You took everything from me, but I built it all back and more. I don't need you, Mark. Will doesn't need you. And you don't deserve either of us." Mark opened his mouth to respond, but I was done. "This conversation is over. Don't come back." I stepped inside and shut the door, the sound of the lock clicking like a final nail in the coffin. When I turned around, Will was standing there, his big eyes filled with curiosity. "Who was that, Mom?" "Just a bad memory, sweetheart," I said, pulling him close. "One that's finally gone for good." The morning was warm, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of blooming roses through the garden. I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the delicate lace on my wedding dress. It was a design of my own, one I'd poured my heart into, a reflection of my journey. Every stitch, every detail symbolized a piece of the life I'd reclaimed. "You look stunning," my mom said, her voice thick with emotion as she adjusted the veil. I glanced at her and saw the tears welling up in her eyes. She'd been my rock through everything, and seeing her so proud filled my chest with warmth. The ceremony was small, just close friends and family. Alex wanted it to be a grand event, but I insisted on something intimate, something that focused on the love we'd built, rather than the spectacle. Standing under an arch of white flowers, I took Alex's hands, and for a moment, everything else faded away. His vows were simple, but heartfelt. "You've shown me what resilience looks like, what strength truly means," he said, his voice steady but full of feeling. "And I promise to stand by you, no matter what life throws at us." When it was my turn, I looked into his eyes and spoke from my heart. "You believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. With you, I feel safe, valued, and loved. I promise to build a life with you, a life filled with love and purpose." As the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, applause erupted. Alex leaned in, and our first kiss as husband and wife was filled with the kind of joy I thought I'd never feel again. Weeks later, life settled into a beautiful rhythm. I stood in the backyard of our new home, sipping coffee and watching Will play with our dog. The house, with its wide open spaces and warm colors, felt like the perfect sanctuary, a place filled with love and peace. As Alex joined me on the porch, wrapping an arm around my waist, I smiled. "This is it," I said, my voice quiet but sure. "This is the life I dreamed of, He squeezed my hand. You made it happen. Watching Will's carefree laughter, I knew he was right. I had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and challenges that once seemed insurmountable. But through it all, I found strength, love, and a future brighter than I ever imagined. This was my happily ever after.